There's no safe like Simply Safe, and we're going to talk about it today. A confession from Grant Amato. We finally hear from Sylvie. This was one of the best follow-up documentaries I have seen on a case in a long time, and we're going to review it and talk about it in today's video. Hello, Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the sofa. The sofa's back there. That's Roscoe. He's sitting on it. He's now sniffing my finger. He's very curious as to why I'm pointing. And my name's Paul. I'm sitting in front of the sofa. And what we're going to be doing today is reviewing the Grant Amato 3-part docuseries. It's on Paramount at the time of this recording, at least. We're going to be reviewing it. Now, if you've been with the sofa for a while, you'll know how we do these is I literally sit down and watch it and make notes on my phone and then kind of come back here and go through the talking points and discuss it. Almost like a book club or that type thing. What will be different with this video, this is a very popular case. I did like over an hour long video on it, I don't know, a year or so ago. And we're going to get to a certain segment where I'm going to review a few of the interview clips from my video to get everybody on the same page of what the vibe is, in case you haven't, like, you're not familiar with it, that type thing. And what I want to do before we get into it is to go over like basically the 60-second version of what the case is, who it's about, that type thing, so that if you are new to it, you have some context before we move forth. Now let's just go ahead and jump right into that tagline on IMDb. This chronicles the life and downfall of Grant Amato. He was convicted of taking the life of his parents and brother following an obsessive relationship with an internet cam model. Now, Grant Tiernan Amato is his full name. And let's just go over a few of the quick facts about the case so we're all on the same page here. So Grant was convicted, like I said, of taking the life of his mother, his father, and his brother, Cody. Now, this was back in January of 2019. He did this with a gun at their home in Seminole County, Florida. Now, he tried to make this look like Cody, his brother, took the life of everybody and then took his own life and unalived himself. Grant fled the residence. He basically immediately went and just started spending money on this cam model again. And he was captured after like a 24-hour manhunt, went to trial, found guilty, sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Now, again, the name of this is Control Alt Desire. It's a 3-part series, and at this time, I watched it on Paramount. So let's go ahead and go over episode 1 in the series. Now, one thing that I do need to tell you about before we get into this is massive trigger warning. And by trigger warning, I mean cringe binge warning. I forgot about the level of brutal cringe that Grant Amato gives, and it took me off guard. And I got into this and was like, ooh. I mean, y'all, it's painful. We're talking Chad Daybell, Lori Daybell, loin fire reading painful, okay? It's that bad. So don't get upset with me. I told you right now, this is a cringe binge. And in a few minutes, we're going to actually look at some of his interviews, because it's so you can get an idea, if you're not familiar with this, of the level of cringe we're dealing with here, okay? But for now, let's go ahead and just start talking about those talking points. Like I said, I usually reference my phone here and read the notes right here. It's very casual for these videos. So just know that that's why I'm looking at my phone. I'm not bitch over here talking to people or TikToking. I'm present, okay? Anyways, okay, so season 1, episode 1. There's only one season, 3 episodes. So, I'm going to read my notes and then go from there, right? So it says, Grant Amato was apprehended in a hotel he was staying at. And the series starts off by showing us body cam footage from the cops outside the hotel before they take him down. So that is one of the things that's very unique about this case, is how much footage, whether it's interviews, body cam footage, all this type stuff that was out there and present. And also the literal obliviousness on Grant's part. Part of that goes on that you'll see, we'll talk about, and especially if you're familiar with this, is he is so short-sighted on things. His demeanor is eerie for the fact of he just took the life of his entire family, wiped them out, except for his half-brother Jason. So there's that right there. But the rest of his family he took out. Jason wasn't living at home. So we'll get to that in a little bit. But Grant is just easygoing, chill. You would think they had the wrong guy at first. And that's what makes him completely frightening. And in this docuseries, we see him. He's talking. The way that this is structured is that Colin is the director or filmmaker, whatever. He corresponded back and forth, letters, video chats, phone calls with Grant for like 4 years. And this is documenting that. So you can only imagine, when I saw it was current, like not current, but you know what I'm saying, like current last few years video footage of Grant talking, I was glued, okay? Glued to the TV. Let's keep going. So at this hotel where he's apprehended, they lock down the hotel, they take him in. He's very calm and creepy when he talks to them. We just covered this. Now, the narrative then switches to the interviews that were conducted that I've been telling you about. And this is what it's absolute brutal cringe, I write. And this is where I want to pause for a second and take a look at just a few clips, not many, for those that are not familiar with this, or for those that just want to be reminded of how damn cringy the man is. So let's go on and roll tape.
First person I call is my dad. My brother. And
what is your brother's name?
Cody. Cody,
okay.
Sorry. First person I call is him, and he was at work at the time, but he answered his phone, and I was just like, look, I'm freaking out. I've been charged with this. I've been told that my bond is this. And then I guess he tells, whoever was working that day with him, I gotta go. So then he calls my mom. He calls my dad. He smooths things over as best as he can. He's just basically saying, I'm going to...
And Grant thanked his brother Cody for this type of care and whatnot with a bullet in his head. Keep in mind during this interview, number one, what you're seeing here. So that's Grant, if you're not familiar with it. He's referring to Cody. Cody is his brother. They were like this, and we'll get into more details. And Grant is specifically talking about an event at another one of his jobs. Again, we'll get into it more details, where he was caught. He's been charged with some criminal charges. This is very serious. And here you see an example of Cody coming in, picking up the pieces, making things right, the whole 9 yards. This is what Grant's family did, and it was to a fault. He took it for granted. He expected it. He was entitled to it. And when he didn't get his way, we see the outcome of it. But also keep in mind with these interviews, this is a man who's just been apprehended, whose family is dead, at his own hand. It takes for a while for him to even really get curious as to like what's going on. He feigns a little bit of interest in that, but not in any way that if you or I were apprehended in this way by the police that we would be like, what happened? Nothing. This is the deadpan behavior of him. Let's watch the next clip.
What do you like to do? What do I like to do? I like to watch anime. Me and my brother kind of started doing that back 5 years ago. I'd say he kind of got me into it.
What is it? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I don't know what it is.
I mean,
I thought you said MMA. And I'm like, okay, and then when you started explaining it,
I
heard it. I'm like, no.
It's animated.
Now this is one of Grant's, I don't even know what you would call it, his interest, but it's literally another obsession, I guess. Huge anime guy, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? But it will also inform the level of obsession he takes in the cam model world. So here you see him, he's perked up, he's excited. He is so excited to talk to these officers about this. Remember, he has the images in his mind of his family at his fingertips losing their lives. But you see how let's talk about anime. Let's go to the next clip.
We actually just went to, me, my brother, and one of my friends, or I guess friends from high school. We went to Japan from December 1st to December 15th.
Oh, wow.
So we went because, and it was anime that kind of inspired us to want to go.
Was that your first time going?
Yeah. First time actually.
Who went? You, your brother, and who?
Our friend Jericho.
Jericho.
He was originally a friend of my brother's back in high school, and then we all have kind of stayed.
Again, you hear these relationships. We went there, it was because of anime. Grant's way completely paid. Brother paying the way, taking care of him. How does he thank him? He steals from him on the trip and runs off to get with Sylvie on the cam. This is how Grant operates. Let's go to the next clip.
I guess you could say behind the scenes, my mom would let me talk to her through her cell phone using Twitter. She would tell me, like, look, you have to keep it just basic, because if you say anything or if you entice anything or do anything like that, it might lead her to say something.
Now here's the thing, and we will hear about this as we get further into this video and whatnot through the docuseries, is the mother, yes, when she went to the rehab, she was letting him call Sylvie. She had this soft spot. She was a very empathetic, compassionate person. She loved working with animals. It's very devastating to hear. It's like she cared to a fault, if that makes sense. Let's go on to the next clip.
So he had found, like just the stuff that was related to her. And then, you know, he erased my whole entire computer. He put a password on it. So it's like, even when I came back up until Thursday, like I wasn't able to go into my own computer to look at anything.
He's treating you like a small child.
And Grant did not like being treated like a small child at all. But this is what it took. His father finally just put his foot down and made this huge list of stuff. We'll talk about it here in a minute as we get deeper into the review and whatnot. But Grant did not like this. He would pretend to and act like he would go along with it. But, this infuriated Grant. He was way too good for that.
You know, it wasn't really my intention to continue talking to this woman, but it just kind of happened. And then because there was like that emotional connection, I guess you could say, between her and me, like I like, you know, it felt like a relationship, you know. I didn't want to just stop cold turkey on it.
That's the cringe I'm talking about. I mean, you see where I'm going with this. You know, he truly believes that he's in a relationship with her, and you can tell through this docuseries that he still is very confused about the boundaries of that, right? So I just wanted to go over those few clips. This is all we're going to look at, so you have an idea when we reference these throughout that this is the energy he's giving. So let's continue with the review. Now, there's two detectives that we're going to see questioning and coming back into the docuseries and whatnot. This is Danny and Eva. Now, they were in the original interviews and whatnot kind of a thing. Now, the narrative will then switch to Michael Williams, a reporter for the Orlando Sentinel. Now, he covered the case. And he says that when he hears, I'm just going to read directly. He says when he hears the name Grant Amato, he thinks about how compulsions can turn into obsessions and the dark and the dangerous path that leads down. Next, we hear from public defender Jeff Dowdy and Jared Shapiro, and they say they've handled dozens of these type of cases, and they remark about how calm and mundane and nearly normal Grant is. Now, again, the couple of key things with this that brought up, so the reporter will hear all the way throughout this docuseries, and he will talk about the obsession, and that's what a lot of this case is about, is compulsions and obsessions. Because when you hear like the amount of money that this man spent on this cam model, it's insane, y'all. Like literally insane, okay? Now, also one interesting point that the public defenders bring up is the aspect of how calm, how mundane, how boring. Grant is not what you expect. Like when you go into your mental Rolodex of like, this is what I envision of somebody who would do this looks like. It's like Grant's typically not that, right? He's very meek, very passive, very like beta, that kind of a person, right? Not this like hyped up, you know, whatever the case may be, right? And so even talking, you know, you can almost argue that what's that eeriness, that mundaneness that makes him the type, right? Because as you sit here and listen to him talk, it's just like, what this guy is scary, and especially in hindsight's always 2020, we know what the case was, and so it makes it that much worse. Then we're going to hear from a woman. Her name is, she goes by Mary. Her voice has changed. She's kind of in a silhouette. She says that Grant is kind and smart, normal, and he did love his family a lot. Now, she will remain throughout and come in and out of this. Basically, it seems like she had some form of a, I'm using air quotes here, relationship with him after incarceration, this type of thing, that she reached out to him. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind as we review this, because we'll hear from her more towards the end and get more like insider intel, I guess you could say. Then we hear back from Eva, that investigator I told you about. She was interviewing him, and she says that she wouldn't call him crazy, but definitely a little bit odd. You know, and again, it's a relative term, right? He is odd, you know, crazy, like what we're thinking, like what I talked about earlier of like what you might imagine, like what lurks in the dark at night type thing. No, he doesn't come off that way. Very odd, very selfish, very not aware of anything but his own self, right? And obviously, you know, again, I'll say it, very selfish. All right, then we see Colin, the filmmaker. He's having a video call with Grant. Grant's smiling, he's laughing. Honestly, he looks vibrant. Because here's the thing, by the time they call him, you gotta remember, Grant is sitting on the computer for hours and hours and hours a day. I mean, like literally like 16 hours a day. He's not doing anything but bankrupting his family, spending all of their money paying this cam model, right? So he looks like what you would imagine, pale, unkempt, just mousy, that kind of thing. So the first thought that I had in seeing him is I was like, wow, he's thriving. You know, and he probably is doing well being in a scenario where people tell him what to do and when to do it on some level, and he doesn't have to think or do for himself because he never was really able to do that on the outside, at least in that latter part of his life. Let's keep going. Now we see his room, his cell, whatever you want to call it. He has a top bunk and a modest collection of things with a little slit for a window. It's an 8x10 space. Now Colin asks Grant what he thinks he will get from this project of going back and forth for the last few years, a project that Grant's doing. And Grant says probably a lot of headaches, and that probably, panned out to be true. Now, on a phone call, Grant says he didn't come from the lifestyle that breeds the typical inmate. And this seems to be very important for Grant to separate himself in that way, in that context from his surroundings. He talks about where he was from and how everyone had big plots of land. He says that his life was easy. He was taken care of and he never had to worry about money. He says that his family sacrificed a lot to give him that security. And it's true. They did a lot. His father busted his butt. His brother did his butt. They all busted their butts. And I would say for a time, Grant was on that same track, because what we'll hear throughout this, and if you followed it, you'll know, Grant and Cody were like this. It was like they did everything together. They were going the same career, the same this, the same that. And we'll get to that here in a second. But at some point things happen, things veer off. And this is where Grant, a failure to launch type scenario. And so that's where your heart breaks, obviously, for what he did. But when you see how much his family cared for and looked out for him, and to see how he thanked them, it's inexcusable. Okay, then the narrative switches back to that infamous police interrogation. The detective confirms who was living at home, and Grant says himself, Cody, his mom and dad. The narrator then breaks down the relationships. You have Chad the father, Margaret, so Chad and Margaret, the parents. Grant was 29, Cody was 31 at this time. The detective then stresses the importance of a crime scene, and they describe the house as choppy with lots of room, that it seemed like their little cocoon where they never entertained anyone. And that's one thing when you look at, if you've looked at the crime scene photos, or if you look at documentaries and stuff like this on this, they lived in this, like, what I call your kind of stereotypical mini mansion, McMansion, whatever you call them, in Florida. Stucco, large home, but on a huge plot of land. If you're familiar with Florida, to me, it was giving Ocala, Florida. Horse money, Ocala, Florida. And in fact, the horses that the Margaret liked to look after were, I believe, like right down the road from them. It was a different neighborhood in that way of like just big pieces of property, that type thing. When they're going through the house, it's like you would open a door and you would see, oh, well, they have a cabinet blocking this, or aluminum foil over these windows, or this and that. So it did really seem like this was a family that functioned to themselves, and they did well in that space. But it was like not any room for outsiders. We're not having dinner parties. We're not having other guests come over, that type thing. This is, like they said, our little cocoon. Now, the detectives will say that it's odd that the brothers, educated, working, still lived at home with mom and dad. And it was kind of bizarre, they would say. One thing you have to keep in mind is this is what was going on. And at a time, before Grant got into legal trouble and that kind of thing, not just with what he did, but legal troubles before that. He didn't make it as a nurse anesthesiologist, couldn't make it as a nurse, got charged with charges for that. Cody made it all the way to the top of their field, and he was making a lot of money. His dad was making a lot of money. Grant was making decent money at one point, but then obviously his life fell apart. But during the zone there, they were still living at home. That's what they were doing. They were living at home, making tons of money, and seemed to be fine for that. Now, the director asked Grant directly why they stayed at home. Grant says they didn't mind living at home, and that the dad was always kind of afraid to let them go and release them to the world. One thing that reminds me of this is when you see how much like enabling goes on within the family, that it's almost like by doing that, and you've probably met people out there, and I'm not trying to shame the parents for this. At this point, is nobody deserves to have what happened to them, right? And it's done now, but it's almost like they didn't prepare them. However, Cody did just fine, right? So it's a Grant thing. So really when this takes place, it's like the personality type, and Grant's personality type wasn't one that could handle that and still be able to go out and do for himself. It was like he took it in a very entitled way. He wanted what he wanted, and he was going to get it at any cost. Now, about Cody, Grant's brother, Grant would say they were close and bonded and did everything together, like I mentioned. Grant says that Cody took care of everything for him, was always there. And Grant would say literally verbatim that Cody was the love of his life and that Cody was his angel here on earth. Grant says they even hoped that they passed away at the same time. They had the same goals in life, work, cars, you name it. I mean, they literally were like attached to the hip. However, and we'll get into it in a minute, once this kind of deviation happens of the failures of Grant, this changes the dynamic. So he goes from this thing of having this brother that looks out for him, that does this, that does that. And I would have to say, Cody seems to be, in my opinion at least, the better looking brother. And I'm not trying to be mean by saying that. You'll get where I'm going with that in a second. Probably the more charismatic and that type thing. So it was almost like he cushioned Grant from that, because Grant is, he's not really that attractive. He's kind of dweeby. His personality, just looking at him a little bit, it's like, I mean, he's okay, but, there's nothing there, right? Whereas Cody might have been a little bit more vibrant, that type thing. Cody had a personality that people were more attracted to, so like Grant was able to live vicariously through him is the energy that I got from it. So let's keep going. So the journalist who we've been referring to will then give some backstory on Chad and Margaret. They both worked in the medical field. They encouraged their sons to follow suit. This is going to enter us into the discussion about what took place with Grant and Cody and their jobs and careers. Now, in a phone interview, Grant says that he and Cody both applied at a nurse anesthesiology school and both wanted to take the degree like as high as they could go to get the most money, just ride it all the way, right? And they start doing this, and things look like they could only go up for the both of them. I mean, literally, it's like you're coming from privilege, you get into these programs, you're going to ride this out, you're going to make, I mean, these people make tons of money doing this job, right? That being said, put it on pause for a second. The narrator switches back to those police interviews, and the investigator in that asks Grant what he likes to do, and Grant immediately says, we saw this. I like to watch anime and play video games. And then back to the phone call, we go back with the narrative to the phone call with Colin. He says his whole life he was always online in some fashion, up to 16 hours a day. Now, we discussed that a little bit there, and one thing I'll say this now, if you're new here or whatever, what I do, like I said, is I go verbatim, like what I'm seeing on the screen, so that's why this narrative will jump around a little bit. I'm just literally making notes as to what is presented on the screen. Now, another dynamic to Grant was his interest in, obviously we discussed it, video games, but also the whole family was very into guns. And in fact, I think one of the attorneys on the show called it the gunshine state or something like that, or whatever, being Florida. It was funny however he referenced it, but I'm just going to read my notes here on it as well. It says, then Grant says he was also into guns. The whole family was. They were really into airsoft. Grant will describe how they teamed up and how, just like in the rest of life, Cody was there for him during this. And during a video interview, he will say when he thinks of everyone, it is Cody that he missed the most. And again, this is going to be Grant's, I don't know what you would call it, like the thing for life or whatever you would call it. He's going to have to live with the fact that Cody was like his soulmate, if you will, a blood brother. I mean, that he looked out for him to this degree and he took his life. The only person that probably absolutely cared for and loved Grant, he took his own life. I mean, let that sink in for a second. So then the narrative switches back to that reporter who we've been hearing from. And he says that the first big shakeup in their lives is Cody and Grant, 2018, when Grant is kicked out of the program that they're in during school. Now, Grant says on his phone interview that he had placed an epidural in one of the female patients. The CRNA told him, due to the patient's stature, that you should only advance the epidural catheter X number of millimeters. They had an argument. This got the attention of others. This led him to getting thrown out. Now, this causes a shakeup with he and Cody. He says Cody did not kicked out, and Cody had to maintain his image in this. So this really annoyed Grant in the moment. He wanted Cody to defend him. Grant says that he felt a valley between them. So here's the thing. One thing you can count on and be assured with Grant is that he's going to water things down and make himself look good. So you can already assume and guess how he probably talked to the CRNA in front of people, and he probably caused a massive scene. And just seeing the behavior of this made them be like, oh my God, because we're going to get into this a little bit later here and we're getting ready to come up to it. But just know that Grant will abuse his power in these situations, being a nurse and that type of thing, to, in my opinion, assault patients. He would have 100% killed patients if he had continued on, because he was on his way to doing it. We'll get to it in a second. Now, when he says Cody had had an image to uphold and all this type of stuff, and he wanted Cody to come to his defense. Yet there's only so much one can do, and probably Cody saw, look, dude, you can't show out like this at work. You can't show out like this at school, whatever the case was. You have to do A, B, and C. I'm trying to get mine. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is the path we're on. I'm trying to get mine. One of us has to keep going, okay? If you fell off the thing, you need to support me and let's keep moving. But you can see where that would probably cause a drift between them. And Grant especially noticed this. So let's go on to the next thing here. It says Grant was still able to work as a nurse, but still more trouble came his way. This is what I was talking about. We then hear a 911 phone call, and it seems to be coming from his place of employment, the hospital. And they said that they were reprimanding an employee who had been stealing medication, but that he was saying things like, I have nothing to live for. He was causing them alarm. So we then see police footage of the scene, and Grant looks like a hot mess. We'll get to that in a second. He had been administering I can never say this word, propofol, the Michael Jackson drug, okay? It's what Michael Jackson took that unalived him. He was giving this to patients to keep them quiet at night because he didn't want to deal with them. We'll get to that in a second. He was charged with theft, with a theft-related charge. The detective said that this one single thing completely changed the direction of Grant's life, everybody's life. And had that not happened, they might not be sitting there for that interview. So when they play the 911 phone call, you can tell, like, imagine, like, consider a very serious scene taking place at work where someone's getting fired for something very serious, and that person is then being like, I don't want to live, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I mean, you've got to call the police, right? Especially in a scenario like this. Now, once they find out that he had been giving this drug to patients because he didn't want to deal with them, do you know this insane liability? This is where I'm saying he would have ended up killing a patient. He's lucky he didn't already, right? And who knows, maybe he had at some point. You know, they just never found out. You know, when the cops show up, I mean, Grant looks strung out, okay? Because number one, he probably was barely sleeping. He's online doing this, doing that, playing games all night, whatever. Then he's sitting here coming into work, doing this so he doesn't have to deal with patients. This is a person that, even though, remember how in the beginning we were talking and it was like, yeah, everyone was like, he doesn't look like a, you know, person who does these crimes and all this. He is absolutely soulless. That's the thing. He kind of, I mean, and to me, maybe because of the context, I look at him and I do think, I'm sorry, he looks like exactly the type of person that does his crimes, right? But there's nothing behind his eyes, and that's what I'm talking about. There's nothing there. It's like he doesn't mind harming any other human being. And that part, it's scary. Okay, now let's go back to the part for the friend Mary that he had that we talked about. So we then see Mary, the friend. She seems to pop in and out of the documentary to defend Grant, is what it comes off like. She says that she feels like this just shows that he's human, that you can make bad mistakes. And this is what I mean by defending him, because I'm like, yes, I get we're all human. We all make mistakes. We're all capable of change, right? It's like, that's the human experience, okay? Yes, even someone like this, come up and pretend nothing else happened, and he was caught like doing something like this at work, and he got psychological help. He realized like, oh my God, what a horrible thing to do to others. You can come back from that, but nonetheless, for me, something like this where you're actually doing harm to another human being and doing something where you are not understanding or appreciating the gravity that you could take their life. You are their nurse. You are in charge of them. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a whole different ball game here, okay? Like, you're taking this oath and you're completely abusing it because it's like you don't want to deal with them. You know, it's just a level of selfishness that harms others. So for Mary to get in here and be like, it's just, you know, something that he's human and that we make bad mistakes. I'm like, yes, we do, and I agree. But this is like a different level here, okay? And obviously what he does to his family is a totally different level. Okay, let's continue. So we hear Grant during a recorded call, speaking of the time that life was falling apart, and he said he felt like he was losing everything, and that it was during this time that having such a close-knit family just exasperated everything. He said his whole livelihood he spent his life on was falling away. He was stuck at home. He was lonely. He was searching for something to fill that void. And you can only guess what he found. Sylvie, the cam models, but let's keep going with the notes in the order they're in. We then hear from Grant during the police interview that this is when he really began trying to be a Twitch streamer. This is someone who films himself playing games to an audience and talks to them. His name was Dualite. I might be saying that wrong or written it down wrong. Deuce or Dose, I think it was Deuce. It was Deuce Light. He wanted to be famous, but realizes he just doesn't have that it factor. It was estimated he made about $150 a month doing it. So yes, he decided during all this that he was going to be a famous Twitch streamer. Now here's the thing, I'm not trying to discount somebody's dreams, but to be like, oh, my life has fallen apart, I'll be an influencer or whatever. It's like that girl who went to, where was it, Texas, and took her kids and had to call 911 because her influencing thing didn't work out. I mean, yeah, come on. This just falls in line with the delusion of Grant of like, oh, and then when he realizes, oh, this is work, you know, it's not just playing video games. And yes, you can look at the interviews, you can see Grant. I'm like, yeah, I'm not seeing a personality that people would really be that interested in hanging out with for a long time and giving money to and that type of stuff, right? But nonetheless, it's what he wanted to do. And so that's the path that he was going to go down and do it. But clearly it didn't work out. Then one day, Grant says he came across a banner named myfreecams.com and he decided to click it. Now, at this point, it's explained that camming is an interactive way to watch models. You can hang out, you can tip them, you can go into private rooms, or, rooms, you know what I'm saying? That type of thing. You can go private. So this is introducing what I told you about Sylvie, the cam model world, all that type of stuff. Her screen name is Addie Sweet, but Grant says that by getting to know her, he finds out that her name is actually Sylvie. She is a Bulgarian cam model, and this literally will be the end of Grant and his family, right? Now, before we move forward, I want to make clear that I am not blaming her for my narrative and talking, right? She's here, she's doing a job, she is being presented this story by Grant, that he is this wealthy entrepreneur, famous Twitch person, all this stuff, right? He has the trappings to be able to make these little videos and record and create this online persona. So, when I say, oh, meeting her was the downfall of his life, my blame is pivoted toward Grant, right? Not her, okay? So I just want to make that clear before we go forward. Okay, so Grant says that they were acting like a couple of high schoolers who had fallen in love. Grant says they became so close and connected. Now, here's the thing with this also, and they will interview cam models throughout this who will talk about it. And they're basically like, look, this is an acting thing, and these guys are coming to us. I mean, mostly guys, right? I mean, I'm sure there's some women, but it's mostly guys coming to them. They're coming there looking for something, and they even describe some of the things like they want a girlfriend experience, which is more like the girlfriend experience, not just a visual, let's wham bam, thank you ma'am, but it's like we talk, we get to know each other, we do this. It's like almost like a fake relationship. And even the cam girl said, you know what? It's hard not to make feelings with these people that you talk to all the time, like from both ends, right? You become familiar, you can get feelings and whatnot. So there's this very blurry line. So you can only imagine someone who is unbalanced and as unwell as Grant, who has very little world experience. You can imagine what they did with that. Now, also Grant talking about we were like high schoolers and all this type of stuff. This is where I'm like, boy, ouch. Okay, the cringe is. That's where I'm just like, really, dude? Like, you really think that she liked you? And maybe she did eventually on some level, you know what I mean? I'm not saying that she didn't, but it's just like, dude, that's her job. It's like going to the bar and thinking the bartender is into you. It's like, that's their job. Going to the strip club thinking the stripper likes you. That's their job. You know what I mean? Like, they're supposed, what do you think they're going to do? Act like they can't stand you? Their job is to separate you from your money. I mean, it is what it is, but again, these unbalanced people fall like victim to it. Like they fall for the illusion of it. And Grant clearly did. Okay, let's keep going. We then see the online infamous clips of Grant recording himself, the cringe, pleading with her to send him a video, and he asks her to just do it, and he says it makes him feel weird when he buys her stuff. Here's the thing. So like I said, he has this whole narrative going with her that he's this wealthy dude in America and all this type of stuff. She doesn't know any different. And honestly, she probably doesn't care, right? Because it's almost like, okay, great. So I have a wealthy person obsessed with me. My business is being a cam model where these guys send me money and tip me and all this type of stuff. Hey, great. We love you. Come on in. Take front row seat. Yeah, but then you see this whole thing where he's like, please send me a video. Please. It makes me feel weird when you don't. But I have to pay for it. And you're just like, oh my God. It is so bad, y'all. It is so bad. Like, you were literally so embarrassed for this dude. You're just like, this is so pathetic. Now, Grant forms a persona on the cam site. Deuce Light was his alter ego. Grant says this character was based on both he and his brother. He presented himself as a nurse anesthesiologist, a very successful Twitch streamer who lived by himself and drove a BMW. Grant says that playing this character was intoxicating and addicting. This is your stereotype we've seen it 100 times. Living at home in the basement, keyboard warrior, nothing going for them, but they create this fake online thing that they just think they are the cat's meow. You know what I'm saying? And that's what Grant did. And so it was addictive. I mean, how would it not be? Like, look at your life, it's falling apart. But online, you're this illusion or whatever, and you're using everybody else's money to tip this girl this and that. Remember, like, when he's in this room, there's all these other guys, so he's able to kind of play this like, yeah, y'all watch me do this. I'm gonna throw 1,000 out there, boys. Can y'all do that? I can already hear the voices in his head, right? I don't think they talk like that, but you know what I mean. There's no safe like Simply Safe, and I'm going to tell you how you can get safe today. Now, y'all, before we even jump into this, I want to just say this. I literally thought when I got this, I was like, you know what? There's no way I will be able to figure out how to install this and do it and all that type of stuff. So I called one of my friends who's like the tech friend. You probably have one. And I was like, will you please come over and just help me install this? When I tell you, I did not even require one bit of his help, okay? It was that easily laid out with the instructions, with everything labeled, the way that the app works in conjunction with all that. Y'all, it was so easy. I couldn't believe it. I was like, sorry for having you come over. I mean, it was good to see you, you know what I mean? Now, however, if you do have issues, don't worry. You can have them install it for you. So the most prized possession in this house, it ain't the recording equipment. Okay, although that is important. It's Mr. Roscoe P. Coltrane back there. Then my parents when they visit, guests when they visit, and of course, Will, me, and then the house, obviously. With Roscoe being older, myself being a little bit older, and then also kind of living in the world that we do here following cases and seeing what can happen, I was like, Paul, you really need to get things on lockdown out here. When Simply Safe reached out, I was like, no brainer. Yes, let's work together. I need this. And it's not just for break-in stuff like that. They cover so many other things. So let's talk about it real quick. So it's security for the whole home. They have tons of different types of sensors, cameras. They're going to detect threats, whether it's a break-in, a fire, a flood, you name it. And they have 24/7 professional monitoring. The Simply Safe agents are ready to hop on it, get to it, and keep your home safe. They can assess the situation. They can contact you. They can dispatch first responders. They can even address a break-in person, criminal, whatever you want to call them, if they're in your home. It's award-winning home security, and it was named the best home security systems of 2024 by U.S. News and World Report, 5 years running, and even ranked best customer service of 2024 in home security by Newsweek. So with a 24/7 live guard protection, the Simply Safe agents, they're going to act within 5 seconds of receiving an alarm signal. They're going to figure out what's going on, what's taking place, and then they're going to take those steps to ensure your family safety, your home safety, your pet safety, all the above. I went through and did several of the things right off the bat. So I did the glass break, I did the door entry, I did the keypad, and I did that smart indoor camera that they have. I put the base of it out in the living room. Now also you'll see I went ahead and put one of the cameras here in the studio. The studio also doubles as Roscoe's little bedroom, so he'll come and go from here. So this enables me to check in throughout the day, see what's going on, and will convey him messages if there's something he needs to get on the sofa and report about. Now here's the beautiful thing about it, in addition to all the other stuff I just told you. This isn't like those old school home security systems. Simply Safe will never lock you into a long-term contract. I'm so over those kinds of business models, and I love that they do this. There's no charges, hidden fees, anything like that, right? The professional monitoring plans, they're available for less than $1 a day. Less than half the cost of the traditional security systems. So I have fallen in love with the ease of use as well as the plans they offer, but most importantly, how much safer and aware it makes me feel while I'm at the house and when I leave the house, knowing I can check on Mr. Roscoe, talk to him. Now also what's interesting, so I have the thing up there and it's still going, so I'm getting these notifications. Camera detected studio, snooze if I want to. I mean, it works. Simply Safe is not only awesome for keeping you safe and secure, they're awesome for hooking the Sofa Squad up. Save 20% on your system, and your first month is free when you sign up for the Fast Protect monitoring at simplysafe.com/reportinglive. And don't forget what I said in the very beginning of this. There ain't no safe like Simply Safe. Grant literally spends his whole day on the platform. He said Sylvia would rationalize this and say, this is the only way we can be together since we can't physically be around each other. Now, one thing you have to also remember with him saying these things, like Sylvia said this, Sylvia said that, you have to take what Grant says with a grain of salt because he is a pathological liar. We don't know if that's really how that went down or not. And again, if Grant came to you and like your job was that, whether it's like you're a stripper or whatever the case is, like in this adult entertainment, and you know that there's some dudes that want a girlfriend experience, some dude that just want to come, they don't care about you, they just want to, wham bam, think you met, whatever the case is. You are, just from Grant's behavior, you know, oh, this is one of those. Borderline stalker. He wants the girlfriend experience. He wants the wifey experience, okay? So that's what I'm going to give him. He's my customer. That's what I'll give him. Again, you don't know what's really going on. It's like, if this is a grown man that wants to spend his money on me like this, okay. You know what I mean? Like, this is what he's presenting. So, what is she to do about it? And again, for me, you can't really believe what he's saying coming from her because he's so delusional and he's a pathological liar. So the narrative switches back to the police interview, and Grant is explaining that over the last few months, he's been talking to a cam model. So remember, he's been not arrested. He's been brought in for questioning from the hotel. They know the family's dead. They're going through this questioning, talking to him. They know he was like, basically like, we need a confession from this dude, right? He has something to do with this. But so he's explaining the cam model and what this is. Grant explains the tipping system and how she would rank the men. And he said he tipped the way he did for the attention and the glory of it. 100%. Okay. I believe him on that. He ain't lying about that. Grant says he ended up spending between, brace yourself, 12 and 15 grand a day. Unemployed. 12 to 15 grand a day. Y'all, that part, I'm like, even if you were a millionaire, can you imagine spending that on that? That's how unbalanced this man was, right? And just look at it from her point of view. That's just one guy. She had to be making tons of money. I mean, granted, the thing's probably taking a percentage of it or whatever, but I mean, 12 to 15 grand a day. The cop's mouth had to hit the damn floor, okay? Grant says his behavior in the chat room was totally different than his behavior in the physical world. He says in the physical world, he was quiet, distant, and closed off. I mean, we've seen this. Yes, we agree. Colin, the filmmaker, and Grant talk about the anime, and specifically Death Note. Grant says he loved it. This is some anime show or something. Grant says that he loved it because it was similar to a mentality he had when growing up. Main character finds a notebook, and when you put someone's name inside the book, they will die at some point. Very interesting. Grant, Cody, and a friend Jericho eventually make a trip to Japan. Now, this is the trip that I mentioned earlier that we're talking about. So the narrative has switched to this segment of his life. Cody finances the trip. Now, remember, all the time throughout this, keep in mind the things that this family and people do for Grant and how he thanked them. Grant says that they went to several cities and toured several spots famous in the anime world. And the anime and their love for it was a reasoning, a push to go on this trip, as he said in the clip earlier. Now, but toward the end, Grant spirals into a depression. So on the final day in Japan, Grant says he didn't say anything to anyone, he just disappeared. Cody kept calling him and he was finally able to track him down. Grant comes clean and tells him about Sylvie for the first time. Cody actually has sympathy for Grant and will finance more tokens for him to talk to Sylvie. Grant says his token limit was 7 grand and that Cody sat with him for like an hour and a half while he chatted. Grant says it made him realize how odd it was. Grant says from that moment forward, Cody never let him out of his sight. 7 grand. Can you imagine? The amount of money is shocking to me. Just that alone. This is on the trip to Japan that he paid for. I mean, you go, Cody. You got it like that. But also notice where the family is like, I mean, first of all, here's Grant. He's kind of a little weasel. His life has fallen apart. He's his own worst enemy. And now he's in love with a cam girl. You're going to have some form of sympathy for someone, especially if it's your family member, even if you don't agree. Where it's like, they're in love with this girl. My God. He's lovesick. I know what that's been like. We'll deal with this later. Okay, look, here's some money. Go talk to your little girlfriend and get out of your system. And then, how odd to sit there with him. And probably when Cody saw Grant and how he was, where he's like, hey, baby, this is my girlfriend. And he saw very quickly, bro, you are being complete, like, what? And saw how delusional Grant was. He's like, oh yeah, he's not going to leave me out of sight. You're in Japan and you run off and hide? No. Grant also stole money during this trip too. When they get back to Florida, the family dynamic changes. Cody tells her father about Grant's obsession with Sylvie, and you know that just ran all over him. Now, in regard to being back from that trip from Japan and whatnot, once they were back, it was very suppressive. It was like he couldn't escape, so he runs to his Aunt Donna's house. Now, Grant says that Cody is calling him, asking him what his plan in life is and all that type of stuff. One thing that goes on during this whole thing, like if you followed the case or done like deep dives on it, this is like a very pivotal time because he goes to his aunt's house. It's kind of like a little sanctuary for him to get away from, but everything's still crumbling down around him, right? She doesn't really understand at this point like what's going on to the level, like it's almost like he dips out, gets to a little safe place, but she doesn't know the gravity of what's taking place, but his family does, and they're like all forming a little plan around him. We are then shown videos that Grant filmed during this time. He's in his car in a parking lot. He's filming a video to Cody, and he says, I hope you believe me when I tell you that you're my best friend, but I also need $50,000 wired to an account that I'll give you the numbers for, and I hope that I can see you again before I have to enact a plan. I mean, it's very shady, and it's almost like, honestly, like he's giving him a shakedown, like is what it feels like a manipulative type thing, or I'm gonna have to do something or do harm to myself, something like that. Like he is desperate. Imagine your fix being another human being, and to get to that other human being, it's like thousands and thousands of dollars a day. But it's not just her. Remember, he's also doing this, and he'll talk about this further, where it's this whole thing where he's around these other dudes and like, yeah, let me show you, I'm gonna throw 1,000, I'm gonna do this, and it's giving him that validity. So it's not just access to her. I mean, that's obviously his end goal, but it's this whole macho bravado thing in this chat room of a bunch of people that he doesn't even know. Now, next, Grant says from prison that he was trying to make plans to get funds to fly to Bulgaria and get Sylvie. Grant says he was so fixated on this lifestyle with Sylvie. So, again, he had this little notion that he was going to run over there and get her. I guess bring her back to mom and dad's basement. Or maybe he was thinking about buying a house. Who knows what he had wrapped around his mind. But probably what would have really happened is he would have just ended up spending that money to talk to her just to make the plans. It's like, honey, it's going to cost you $50,000 just to make the damn plans with her on her website. She's probably thinking this is just this dude's fantasy. I'm never going to see him. You know what I'm saying? So it says, Grant says he was at his Aunt Donna's house and Cody calls him to come outside. So he does, and he realizes the family is doing an intervention, which, praise Jesus. They are going to take him to rehab. Grant says it was like he was frozen. Grant says Cody says that if Grant runs, he will take his life. So this is all very toxic all the way around. I mean, I get them doing the intervention. They didn't know what to do, right? But this is how you have this currency that they're operating in of Cody and this very codependent relationship that they all have. You can almost see how it was. And I'm not going to say like it was never going to end well because you never expected this to happen, right? But it's just, it was like they were too isolated, if that's a good word for it. They were too isolated. They were too into themselves, into their own stuff. And not to shame them or anything, but again, hindsight, you just see this, the water boiling, the accident on its way, the train getting ready to crash, that type thing. So Grant gets in the back seat and he says he screams in anger. And it was like, that's when he snapped. Grant says in the 3-hour drive, he didn't say anything and that his phone would buzz and he would look at it and it was Sylvie and he felt like he was letting her down. During the police interview, Grant says that his family checks him into Cornerstone. It's a rehab in Fort Lauderdale. And Grant says that while he was in the rehab facility, his father found Sylvie's contact information. He calls her and tells her the truth about everything. Basically, that Grant's nothing but a loser. Now remember, he has stolen a couple of $100,000 from them at this point. From his brother, from his mother, from his father, from everybody, right? He has run them into the ground financially. So for his dad to call up and be like, yes, Sylvie, Grant, this is Grant. Hey, this is Grant's dad. Your pretend boyfriend is a loser. You know what I'm saying? Who's ripped us off? Not a cute look. So from prison, during his little interview or whatever the call on, Grant says that, looking back, he's like, okay, so now she knows everything, right? And she gives him the chance to come clean, speak your truth, tell me everything. And he says that, allegedly he says that he tells her the truth, and that she's then like, okay, well, my room is cut off. Like, basically she blocks him. She's not allowing him to come in the chat anymore, and he was obviously devastated over this. Now, at this point, Colin, the filmmaker, asked Grant, do you feel like she was breaking up with you? And Grant says, absolutely. And I only stayed at the Cornerstone Rehab for maybe another 4 or 5 days. It was a 60-day program, and his mom came to pick him up only after a few weeks. One thing to know, and I think I make note of it later, but we'll go ahead and talk about it in case I didn't. The mother, he claims, would let him, during the short stint there, take her phone and contact Sylvie. So she was still like enabling this behavior. This is the soft spot that she had that was like to a fault, right? Remember when I mentioned earlier that she cared for horses and stuff like this? It was almost like Grant was just another wounded little animal. I mean, granted, it's her son, but he has that like a wounded little bird thing, And so she was allegedly allowing him to do this and kind of enabling that behavior. Obviously, again, we see how he thanked her. Now, once he checks himself early, comes home, the dad is done. Okay, the dad is done, as you can imagine. So his father is fed up. He takes him to California Pizza Kitchen, and he basically has this real stern talk and gives him this ultimatum. His dad had made this huge list, front and back, and it was like all these things that he was supposed to do. It was like the internet's going to be monitored, door locks changed, no access to cars. He was basically on complete lockdown at their house. No weapons in the house. He was not allowed to speak to Sylvie, anything. Now, if he was so much as to breathe wrong, it was, you're done. You're out of here. Grant said when he returned home, he felt like a tenant. Well, my thing is this. I'm like, well, yeah, dude. Look at how old you are. It's one thing. Here's my thing. I know that the filmmakers and not the filmmakers, but the detectives and stuff are like, it's a little odd that these grown men making tons of money are still living at home, but it worked for them. And my thing is this, like, well, number one, everybody can do what they want to do. Cody's over here making a bunch of money. If he wants to live at home and he feels comfortable with his parents, so be it. Grant is living off of them and not even doing that, but ripping them all off. So he is like a leech, a parasite. I do have a problem with him living at home at that point, because it's like he's not learning. Cody's probably contributing to the household. Grant is not. Grant is taking from, and obviously will do so in the most ultimate of ways eventually. Okay, so Grant says that the life he was left with, he felt pointless. Now, the episode ends with a welfare type of check being performed at the Amato house. It's Cody's co-workers. And basically the phone call coming in, like the 911 phone call that we're listening to, is like, they're worried he didn't show up for work. It's very odd. It's not like him. And this would be the beginning of the end for the Amato family. We see body cam footage of the officers arriving to the home. It's very eerie knowing now what we know, what they're about to walk into, okay? So then the narrative switches back to that police interview with Grant, and they're asking him, why do you think we're even here? And they've been talking this whole time and going over all this stuff. He knows something happened, but he's not really even asked about it. This is red flag number one, right? So they're like, why do you even think we're here? And Grant says, I don't know, but I'm starting to get really freaked out. And this ends. And I mean, so you, again, what would you do in that situation? You've been dragged in, pulled from a hotel with a damn SWAT team. You would be asking some serious damn questions. Nope, not Grant, doesn't want to know. Okay, let's go into episode 2 now. So episode 2 starts off with Grant being interviewed in one of his prison interviews. And he says when his father found out about all the money that he had stolen, he takes him out back to the patio. He has a stern talking with him. And he says that the devil told him that when Grant was born, the devil came to him and told him that Grant would be his biggest failure, his biggest disappointment. Well, he lived up to that, obviously. And Grant says that destroyed him inside. We are then shown graphic and tragic pictures of the house and the news reports of the murders taking place that went out, around locally and whatnot. The 3 bodies are found, but the 4th person, Grant, is nowhere to be found at first. We are then shown cringy police interviews of Grant, and Eva is questioning him and asking what happened in the home. He's the only one that had issues with his dad, but we see how Grant will just double down and pretend like he has no idea what took place. So Grant will be sitting there and he's like, I don't know. You know, and he's such a bad liar, okay? And like the whole thing is, again, a whole narrative reminds me of Wendy Adelson of, well, I was going towards the house and saw a police car, so well, I just turned around. Why would you not go down your road? Why would you not call? Because you know what happened because you did it. You know, that's the whole thing. So even the investigator says she's never interviewed someone like him. He was so cold, she said, and though there appeared to be some type of tears, she didn't believe that they were real, nor would I, right? He probably was really mustering them up. Now, the narrative of the film then switches to the film director Colin to making those first phone calls that he did with Grant from prison. And he asked Grant, like, what's your mental state like these days? And Grant says it's a mix of depression with optimism and says there's no new evidence to link anything to him and that his story has always been what it is. He says he's totally innocent. So remember, Collins talked to Grant over several years and beginning before he was convicted and all that type of stuff. So he's created this dialogue. So it's interesting to know at this point that during this time, Grant, you know, he's sticking by, I'm innocent, I'm innocent, I'm innocent. He's getting ready to drag the family, the public, everybody through this legal mess. Okay, the narrative then switches back to the public defenders, and they talk about this first few days of getting the case and going to meet Grant. And they said that they expected to meet someone who was like emotional, but it was anything but that. They said that he was a very abnormal client. He wanted to go to trial, and it would end up being a death penalty trial. So again, you know, this whole thing of his affect, his demeanor, all this type of stuff, it kind of throws you off because he's just so, yes, well, okay, my parents are dead. We'll be going to trial. I'm very innocent. You know, you're just kind of like, okay, what's up with this dude? Let's keep going. The state's case would focus on all the issues the family had been going through. They talk about how close they were and how much they all helped Grant. The state will also say that his motive was the cam girl Sylvie. They say he was addicted to her, and yes, he was. And yes, they all helped him. They bent over backwards. They drained their bank accounts unknowingly. You know, and even once they found out, they were willing to stick by him and work through it. I mean, this was a tight-knit family. Again, to a fault, unfortunately, but, you know, a lot of people could look at this and say, wow, I wish my family was like that. Like, you know, this is like through thick or thin type stuff, right? And only towards the end when it got like basically hopeless, the dad was like, okay, we're doing tough love here, right? That's the only thing left. Now we flash to one of Grant's prison video clips and it shows him saying that his relationship with Sylvie was like a buoy in the water, and how he wasn't successful at the time. He said so many negative things were going on in life, and he just got lost in Sylvie in that pretend world. We are then showed a place called Models for Models. It's like a recording studio for these cam sites and that type of stuff. Remember how I said earlier we hear from cam girls throughout this? Well, it's a bunch of cam girls, and they describe what it's like having to be there emotionally for these clients. They say they act like therapists to them. Sometimes they even play one in fantasy. These men want to be heard. They want a girlfriend experience. They're not looking for a wham bam, thank you ma'am type thing. And that's what we were talking about earlier, where they're wanting like this. It's a very complicated, layered relationship. It would almost be easier for the girls, I would imagine, if they were just like, yeah, I just want a visual. I don't want to get to know you. I don't want to talk. But these men are looking for something. They're looking for the whole thing. You know, they're wanting that gratification of that end of it, these hot girls and all that type of stuff, but they're also wanting this emotional thing attached to it. Can you just imagine, with what we know about Grant so far, look at how emotionally needy and clingy he was. Imagine dealing with that all day long and having to perform. Like, it utterly exhausting, okay? Now, when asked during a prison video interview if he still thinks of Sylvie, he says often that she was like a lifeline. Now, there's another prison video interview, and Colin asked him how he characterized his relationship with his dad. And Grant is at a loss for words, and finally says it was taxing that his father was all over the place. The public defender said that yes, the father, Chad, was very controlling, a very regimented man, very like boom, boom, boom. This is how this is. This is how things go. You know, like the list of rules, the this, the that, which, I mean, you see Grant's behavior, you kind of had to be with him. Grant says that his family dynamics were suffocating and you were expected to produce just as equally as his father. I can understand, for somebody like Grant who's more laid back and chill, and your father is like the example in the house, and he's like, he's at a 10 and you're at a 5. And it's just like, look, I just want to calm down and play some video games. I can understand that. But what Grant doesn't also understand is like, dude, you got to the point where you were going up and then something happened, and at this point, and like looking back on it, I'm like, really what should have happened is he should have gone into deep psychotherapy and really worked through this and worked through all these issues and some of this lockdown. So, it's hindsight's always 2020, and they didn't know till it was really too late. But some of these rules that were implemented, if they had been implemented a little bit earlier, because the whole thing of like, he's just, even when he's still at his job where he's going home and coming back and getting on Twitch and the cam and all that, it was like he just needed that reeled in. It was almost like he needed like a live-in, I hate to say it, life coach, but something like that. You know what I'm saying? Not Ruby, not Jody. Let's keep going. Now we are then shown news clips, quick interviews, and digital evidence of him spending $200,000 on this camgirl Sylvie. We are told by the reporter that what Grant was really doing was fraud. He was taking out fraudulent loans, signing up for credit cards under his father's name, all sorts of nefarious things. And Grant admits in his prison video interviews that he opened up these credit cards and used their credit cards without their knowledge. One of the prosecutors even says he spent $20,000 in just one evening. So again, can you imagine you're being any of these people, the brother, the father, you've worked your whole life, you've done this, and you start getting, because Grant wasn't paying the minimum payments to hide it. He would just open a credit card and then move on. Well, you're trying to protect your credit, protect this, and keep him from going to jail, because that's the thing. You see him report this, my son opened up fraudulent credit cards. You're not wanting to send your own kid off into that trajectory. Again, trying to protect him. The same narrative that's come out throughout the whole thing. But Grant does not realize this. It was literally like a video game to him, in my opinion, where it was just like, oh, I got this card, I'll do this. This gives me my fix for tonight. I can give it to Sylvie. That's as deep as it went with him. It was all about him. It was all about his access. It was all about this fake world he created. The reporter says that after these crimes were discovered, that his family did not turn their back on him. They resolved to help him. The reporter says that because of this, his father had to change his life. He had to work longer hours. He had to take out a second mortgage. It was a huge strain on the family. And this is what I talked about earlier, where it was almost like this, on one hand, you want your family to be like this die hard, ride or die, we're in this together, we're going to fix this. But then when you see someone like Grant, who clearly takes advantage and granted of it, Grant takes it for granted, but you know what I'm saying? That's where it's evil. If Cody had gotten into, and I don't even think Cody would ever get into the situation, but say Cody had, I don't know, anything, developed a gambling problem, something. I feel like Cody had exhibited these signs where he would have been like, okay, this is what we need to do. This is an issue. We're going to go get this fixed. We'll go to rehab or whatever. We'll get out. We'll continue. Grant didn't have that same set of whatever, whether it's morals or whatever, which is odd because they were hand in hand. They grew up together. They grew up in the same house, but something deviated with Grant. There was something else there. I would argue there was something evil in Grant. So then Grant tells the story about when his father first found out about all this theft. This is just going back to that, revisiting that whole narrative about going out to the garden and saying, the devil came to me when you were first born, you were a failure and all this type of stuff. This really resonated with Grant, this conversation. Again, if it happened, I'm sure it did, because again, it came true, right? So then we go back to the public defenders, and they discuss the state's theory about how the murders went down. And they said it would appear that Chad was the second one shot, and that he was shot in the back first, and then in the back of the head as he crawled, and then his body was flipped over, and his gun holster was put into his belt. His body had been tampered with, and basically when they showed this, first of all, remember, this is a gun family, and so guns, gun safety, all this type of stuff. Well, the way the gun was like tucked into his belt, I mean, number one, you don't put a holster in, like the way it was really weird. But when they showed like an example, like in the court proceedings, they were like, the way this was done was you would have had to pull it out and it would be pointed at you, which is a big no-no. Like any gum person, like, you don't wear your holster like this. And they were like, it was just and of course the science of it, like if this happened, that happened, that type thing. They were like, the body had been tampered with. A scene had been created. So let's continue. Now the state's theory is that after he kills his family, he stayed in the house for a while with their bodies. He then went to a public Wi-Fi spot to continue his conversations with Sylvie. He would use his brother's checking account to log on. Now here's my thing. What I think happened is obviously his world's falling apart. He's getting desperate. His father was done with him. You've got to go. It's a big argument, all this type of stuff. And so Grant's cut off and he is desperate and entitled. That's the worst part right there. He's entitled to all the stuff that he's stolen from them and their money. So it's like, you know what? I'm done with y'all and y'all are going to pay the price and I'm going to get your money so I can go talk to my little girlfriend. Grant says that people don't understand his relationship with Sylvie, that they just see the money he spent on her. But he says that she had become dependent on him, not financially, but to support her mental attitude. Now, I am sure, like, see these girls said and stuff, like, even on their parts, where it's like, yeah, you get to know these people and these guys, and it's hard not to develop some kind of feelings. I mean, you're becoming very close with them in this intimate way. Not just that, but emotionally. And so I do not doubt for one second that there was some kind of a bond there with Grant. What I do doubt is that it was the same bond going both ways, right? Because you got to remember, I mean, first of all, $200,000, I mean, come on, right? He was sending her tons of money. You know, that's going to be a driving force. You know what I'm saying? Like, would she have made herself that available to somebody who wasn't sending her as much money? I mean, you know, let's do the math on this. And then two, take money, all this out of it. You're doing this, like, she might look at it like, this guy, you know, he's paying all my bills, he's doing this. You know, yeah, I've grown to care about him. I mean, I get advice from him. They did show evidence where she had sent him almost like blood tests. Because remember, he was a nurse, he had gone to school, like all this type of stuff. And they basically were like, this is something that you probably would not send to someone who there wasn't some level of trust there. And, you know, and it was like, this is probably done to get his opinion on whatever her blood results were. So I do believe that there was more than just I'm your cam model person, give me your money for that, right? But again, once you get a phone call from somebody's dad talking about he lives in the basement, he's been, you know, blowing smoke up your ass, that's going to change everything. Now, this one was major, and Colin says, Grant, you know, did you and Sylvie say I love you to each other? And Grant says that yes, they did say it one time. That was such a telling thing for me. I was like, case damn closed. Drop it in the damn comment. Case damn closed on that one. I was like, that tells you everything you need to know. And the way that he said that she did it is, it was like, almost like you're getting ready to hang up and you're like, okay, I love you. And then she's like, oh, I can't believe I said that. If you've, y'all, I think we've almost been in a situation like that where you either sometimes you accidentally say it. Like, I've done this at work before too, where I'll be like, okay, good night, love you. And I'm like, wait, hold on, sorry, wrong person, you know, that kind of thing. Or in the beginnings of a relationship, something like that. But like, you've been going out with somebody and listen to me, going out. You've been in this situation for a year. I'm thinking this. I'm like, she might have just done that to work you over, dude. You know what I mean? And been like, oh, I can't believe I let that slip out. Maybe I am developing feelings for you. You know what I mean? It's like part of the act. It's part of the show, you know? But the fact that all these like red flags for anybody else to listen to this, it's like, so you kind of said I love you like one time and all this? Okay. Got it. Next. Now, Colin asked Grant to describe his mother. So she was caring and always there for people. He said when he was in rehab, his mother was the one that enabled him to maintain his connection with Sylvie. She would sneak her iPhone into the rehab and let him contact her. So, I mean, that's what we talked about. Grant says he signed out of the rehab AMA, against medical advice. I thought it meant ask me anything. I thought it was, he was going Reddit. He was like, I just signed out of rehab. Ask me anything. I was like, no, it was against medical advice. And his father gave him a huge ultimatum list. This is the list we talked about. Now, he says that the ultimatum list was constantly reinforced, that there was no hope for the situation that Grant put the family in. He was told this over and over and over. Grant says by his father. Now, you can imagine, again, at this point, this is not like Grant just did one little bad thing and then it was given him, like this was given to him. It was awful. And you can only imagine too what he was doing, or should I say not doing, throughout this process. It wasn't like, oh God, I messed up. Here, let's go. Because at the end of the day, in this kind of scenario right here, if it's like, well, I messed my nursing thing up or this, that, honey, you take your butt down to whatever is near your house. You know what I'm saying? Walmart, Target, grocery, whatever. You get yourself a little job, part-time, whatever you got to do to show. You know what I'm saying? Because I know the family has it like that. Like they're well off, right? But to show I'm trying. Let me go back to school. Let me pursue another career. Let me do whatever the case is. Does it suck? Sure, it sucks. Your whole life crumbled down. He doesn't view it in the context that he is part of that problem. You see what I'm saying? It's like it was done to him. He had no control or that type thing, no accountability. And so that's where I'm just like, no, I mean, his parents were way more patient with him than most people would have been. So when he's sitting here like trying to complain about this, I'm like, honey, most people would have already done throwing you out of the house. Now, we're then shown scenes from court, and the state says the reason that he killed his mother is simply because she was there. They show the crime scene photos, and Grant cries in court. Now, this is, I can't roll my damn eyes hard enough. Now, you know, oftentimes, let me retract that a little bit. Granted, I still can't roll my damn eyes hard enough, but oftentimes when we see the people in these cases like this, it's very brutal. They've taken the lives of people, their mother, their boyfriend, their girlfriend, whoever, right? And then they want to cry in court. Now remember, in court, he's claiming he's innocent. And we're going to get to that here in a little bit. Knowing what we know now, it's like, well, I would assume and almost hope that at some point the perpetrators would actually cry to be like, what have I done? This is awful. What? Oh my gosh. I regret this now. They're gone. Whatever the case may be. However, I often think of probably somebody like Grant, he's probably crying because he lost his freedom. Yeah, because again, his mother was playing Candy Crush when he killed her. She had no idea. That was the only saving grace, right? And I mean, if you're trying to find a silver lining, the only saving grace to that was that she didn't know what was coming, right? So that part there, it's just like, yeah, I mean, you killed the woman who was letting you contact Sylvie. And again, it's simply because she was there. That's what kind of monster we're dealing with. Now, Grant will say that he thought, and this is back to the current time, the last few years, or whatever, these interviews with Colin, and Grant will say that he thought it was distasteful that they showed the pictures of his mother like that, and he thinks that people should understand that it would be stupid for him to do what he's accused of. He says you can always get another girlfriend, but you can't replace your family. Now keep this in mind. These interviews, remember, started before his convictions and appeals. So there's that narrative going on, because we're going to talk about the other narrative that we hear from him after all that goes through and falls through, right? So just keep that in mind here. Oh, and the fact that he wants to say it was distasteful of them to show that in court. Okay. I mean, I'm just like, seriously, it makes you want to just scream at the top of your lungs. If you remove emotion from it, if you remove outrage from it, psychologically, it's fascinating to be like, wow, this person is going to, and I guess gaslight maybe, I don't know the right word for it. This person's going to gaslight the court system of them doing that when they're the ones who did it. But he's going to say they're distasteful for showing it. It takes a real special someone to like make that mental jump, like that, whatever you call it. Now the narrative then switches to the online community of men that gather around Sylvie. This is what we were talking about before. And Grant says that it gave him confidence to be there in that group of guys, like he belonged to something. And then we see the prosecutor, and they say that just a couple of days before he took his family out, he wrote up an 8-page letter to the other men in the room. And it was basically like an apology letter to where he's coming out to say that he had like made this life up and, all this kind of stuff or whatever. So to me, it almost shows a little bit of pre-planning. But again, I'm like, whoa, this dude was at a level of getting this gratification from a bunch of strangers who were probably also keyboard warriors, showing off in front of a bunch of dudes in a cam girls chat room. I mean, literally, you can see how that world was so much more fulfilling to him than his reality, where nothing worked. He was just this dweeby dude who had destroyed his careers, stealing from his family, all this type of stuff. But over here, with stolen money, he was impressing these guys. Got it, Grant. Now, the investigators say that they did try to reach out to Sylvie to get her take to see what her side of it was, but there was no return phone calls ever made from her. Now, they ask Grant if he's been in contact with her since this happened, and he says no, he hasn't, and she never tried to reach out to him. Keep that in mind. Let that sit back there. Colin reaches out to a Bulgarian journalist to try and find Sylvie. She can't find anything about her. This is like the most elusive woman out there. And I mean, I can understand why at this point, right? Multiple reasons. Number one, you're doing the job that you're doing. You're going to want to kind of be incognito in your real life. Number two, this goes down. You're going to want to be like, whoa. We're then taken back to the courtroom where they're showing the state's theory that this was a botched, basically an unaliving, also / murder scene. It was set up. Essentially, Grant wanted to make it look like Cody had killed his family and then taken his own life. Now, we're then shown a cringy police interview where they're asking him what he thinks happened. So this is back to those interviews, and they're asking Grant, well, what do you think happened? And he says, I don't know. All I know is that Cody said he would take care of everything for me. And I guess maybe there was a shooting? Maybe between Cody and Dad? But that's just a guess, of course. You want to come to the damn screen and pick that boy up by his damn ears. Defiling his dead brother's name like that, number one. Who has been over back. Think of how many brothers would do the stuff that this man did for Grant and look out for him that way. Let alone parents. But expect a brother, okay? Giving you $7,000 to talk to your little cam girl while I'm paying for your trip to Japan? I'm gonna sit there and say that Cody did that. And that's basically what it was. There's this big, if you're not familiar with any of this or whatever, a huge explosion at the house. Grant's kicked out, all this type of stuff. Cody's going to come make it better. So it's almost like this whole thing of like, Cody's like, I'm going to go make this right. And so he's going to go, and Grant's trying to sell the idea that Cody went over there and as a vigilante type thing, maybe this fight and shoot and took out and he kills the parents and then all this I must take my own life. It's absolutely far-fetched and completely not like Cody. We're then shown another clip of Colin interviewing Grant. Grant says that no family and no friends have ever visited him or reached out to him. I mean, do you blame him? And that's the thing. Imagine that. So, imagine whatever your family structure is right now. You know what I'm saying? So, imagine taking out your parents, your siblings, whatever, and, basically you're left with aunts, uncles, cousins, that kind of family. I mean, what do you say? If it's your nephew, what do you say? You killed my brother. You killed my sister. You know what I mean? What do you say? And in the most vilest of ways. Looking back, you would think decades later, you would look back and be like, and I'm kind of coming from Grant's perspective, and to be like, what was I thinking? I've literally created exactly what I didn't want by doing what I did. I'm locked away for life. I'm completely alone. We're then shown the aspect of Grant's only surviving brother, who was luckily not home and living at home during this time. So he was not at home. He was not living at home during this time. His name's Jason. He testified in court. His name is Jason Amato. He's a half-brother. So Jason is brought into the interview room after this happened to try and find out what happened. And Jason will say that yes, he does ask if he killed his family, and Grant was the last one to see him. He wanted to know what happened. Okay, so here's the thing. During these interviews and stuff, they bring Jason in to try and extract information from Grant because Grant's not budging. And Jason's like the voice of reality, but also he's just found out his whole family is dead, except for Grant. Now, Jason was the one, like I said, he's a half-brother to them. Jason was the one that kind of wanted his own identity, his own life, so he chose to move out and kind of do his own thing or whatever. So he wasn't part of this real nuclear thing here, and Grant will say that there wasn't as much of a bond with Jason as there was, obviously Cody. When Jason comes in, he'll ask those hard-hitting questions, of the obvious things like, well, Grant, how do you explain this? You were the last one there. What you're saying doesn't make sense about Cody and the fight. No. Explain this. And Grant he will not budge on that. And I mean, and him saying you want me to get you out, but I'd be afraid for my own life. Rightfully so. And so it's very sobering, let's say, hearing this, because the cops are being very gentle with him for the most part because they're trying to get information. But a family member coming in there and being more realistic of, you've just wiped our family out, okay, and you're not admitting to it. We just need to know what happened, because this is insanity. Why? All the questions you would want to know, he asked them. And if you want to, you can look it up. It's like if you look up the police interviews with Grant, they're all over YouTube. Because another side note in this that was was interesting is when they get to the part of showing creators and stuff. Number one, True Crime Loser was in there. I was like, oh my God, it's Scott. It was so cool. So they're showing different aspects of this, of like how much this case blew up on social media. I mean, because it just had all the trappings for that. I mean, literally. Bailey Sarians, literally everybody has done this case. Because at the heart of it is a tragedy and an absolutely unnecessary loss of life and heartbreak. These people bent over backwards for him, but then surrounding that is this like next level of betrayal, smut, cringe, dweebiness. I mean, all these things that I'm just like, yeah, of course this went viral. I mean, I can completely see why. So back to Jason and his conversation with Grant. We see Jason asking Grant if he had anything to do with it, and Grant denying it. And of course, this is very unbelievable, and you can tell Jason does not believe him. This is what we just discussed. We then see Colin asking Grant what he thought of Jason's testimony. And he brings up the fact that Jason said he loved him, and Grant acknowledges that because it's not a very heartfelt connection that they had. And Grant says at the end of the day, he's still sitting on the prosecution's side. So, I mean, there you go. Even in the midst of all that, Grant's like, he's on the state side. What do you expect? Now, granted, these interviews are done at different times, so there's that. The defense says that they thought they had a really good case and that the state didn't even have a murder weapon. But then during the trial, like an 11th hour type moment, an old high school friend who's known Grant for a very long time takes the stand to testify. This friend will testify that when he did some spring cleaning, he picked up his gun boxes, but they were empty. And that he remembered when Grant and Cody were visiting one time that Grant had gone to use the bathroom, basically was like left alone in an area where those guns were, and that they were gone, like they were missing since then or whatever. So this person here, the way that, when it's broken down or whatever, I'm skimming over it and they skimmed it over in here because it does sound like, well, he did this and that, and, the defense will make it sound like, The way he describes it of like Grant was the only other person in this zone for this amount of time and I had the guns at this point in time and so on and so forth. Yeah, it's a little bit sketch that came in the last minute, but sometimes stuff like that does. But it's like, oh yeah, he totally stole those guns. Completely, no questions asked, But again, only Grant will ever know that. But here's the thing, they have never actually put their hands on the actual murder weapon, and we'll get into some updates with that in just a minute. Okay, so let's move on to episode 3. So the episode begins with a letter being read that allegedly Sylvie recently wrote to Grant. She's basically saying, why did you lie to me? No man ever treated me the way you treated me. You made me feel like a little girl again. She says he will always be her light and superhero. Next, so keep this in mind because we'll revisit that. Next, we were transported back in time to his trial and verdict. And it came in rather quickly in that, everybody, like the defense and these people are in the state are like thinking it was going to take longer. Grant told Colin he hadn't even entertained the idea of a guilty verdict. The verdict is read and he is found guilty, but they don't suggest the death sentence. He is sentenced to life without parole. Oftentimes, if you follow me for a while, I'll ask this question about some cases where I'm like, do they entertain, like this very thing? Do they even consider, like, do they go down that road of, I can be found guilty of these major charges? And then when the evidence against you is so, whatever. But like his defense was like, we thought we had a good case. And I'm like, how? How? It makes zero sense. I'm like, okay, but again, he has nothing to lose at that point. His family's no longer around. He doesn't know how to take care of himself. He has all these financial fraud crimes. So it's like, what are you going to do? Now, next, we fast forward 1 year and it shows how much this case has blown up on YouTube. And this is the part I was telling you about. Grant smiles at the notion of being famous. Infamous is probably a better word. He says he gets hundreds of letters from women and they all say the same thing. They are fascinated by true crime psychology. Yeah. You know how oftentimes we'll see some of these cases where like the dude is like hot, you know what I'm saying? Look at Scott Peterson, for example, back in his day where he gets tons of letters from women. Grant isn't like hot, and I'm not trying to like reduce this down to that, because for me, I'm not that interested in like, I would never want to write Grant and like talk to him. I would never want to write Scott Peterson and talk to him. Yes, I could see the fascination to it, and also it's a little bit different. I'm a guy, like they probably won't even respond to me, so, but whatever. I can see how some people get lost in the thing of oh, he didn't do it. Like, they get caught up in the dude's looks. You know what I mean? And they buy into the story. Or the bad boy. You know, he can't technically hurt you because he's locked away. He's still hot. He did these horrible things. But, you know, this whole psychological component. I'm more fascinated, not by them, but like also by the component of wanting to reach out and interact on that level, right? Mary in this documentary is a good version of that. Where she's talking about Grant and stuff. I'm like, why you're defending him? And like, why would you, what? You know, it doesn't make sense to me. But again, with Grant, I'm like, I'm not seeing the draw. Like, I mean, some of these dudes, I can see like, okay, I can see where a female might be like, oh, here's this hot guy. You know, he might have done this, but let me hear him out. Let me ride him. Like, some kind of interest there. With Grant, I'm like, you know, other than if you wanted to psychologically profile him, and maybe that's what it is. I mean, I don't know. But he found one. I mean, so there's that. It's just like, my God, there's no excuse for us single people out here, right? I'm like, if Grant Amato can find a damn girlfriend in jail, Jesus, I have zero excuse. Let's keep going. Grant says that most of these women, when they learn that he's not some crazy serial killer, will ditch him. I swear to God, it has to be the thing of the bad boy, right? Of the bad boy thing. Tell me what y'all think. It has to be. I wonder if there's books on that, like the psychology of being attracted to like a serial killer, or you know what I mean, like maybe not serial, but like someone like Grant or like Richard Ramirez. Remember, he had groupies in the courtroom. You know what I mean, like that kind of a thing. They ditch him, but he says he's had one person who has reignited his life and makes him feel like life isn't over yet. Now again, this is Mary. Okay, so then the narrative switches to that mysterious person, Mary, who we've been talking about. Now remember, this whole time she's like sits in the shadows, her voice has changed, all that. Well, she found Grant through watching YouTube videos, and she says she felt similar because her parents spoiled her too. She also loved anime, and she knew that he collected and all that stuff. Like there were some commonalities there, right? And I can see that. She began writing him letters, and there were shown numerous videos where he is calling her, y'all, his precious little kitty. Oh, it's the cringe. Always like, hello. It's almost like Chad David, hello, my sweet little kitty. And you're like, I am going to go douse my ears and eyes in bleach, okay? I'm just like, the last thing I needed seared in my damn memory is Grant Amato looking at me in the camera, hello, my sweet little kitty. I'm like, that is like fever dream nightmare stuff right there, okay? I just like, Jesus Christ. I mean, I'm like, please tell me this girl is selling this like footage or something on YouTube, something that is not like genuinely like she just likes this dude, okay? Because the cringe, I said it at the beginning, I'll say it again. And this is why his case, part of it went, in addition to the like I said, the tragedy of it, the reason it's so popular is because the cringe that he serves is on such an insane level. It's almost like you feel like he's trolling. Like it's almost like it's a skit, okay? But it's like, no, this is just this dude. Like he is legit gonna look in that camera. Hello, my sweet little kitty. You know? Oh my God. Stop the world. I want to get off. I'm so done with it. Okay, let's keep going. So Mary says that she doesn't think Grant is a demon. She does think that he fell in love with her, but she says, and again, most everyone does, so she's not surprised. And this is where Mary, it's like already, I'm like, girl, like, even if you're thinking that, I want to say that. She says in real life, she doesn't like being noticed, but she says that men fall in love with her online persona, and now she makes money off of it, and he sends her money. Go on, case damn closed. Certifiable. Case damn close. Now, I said, you have got to be kidding me. He ain't sending $20,000. He might be sending about 2 honey buns a day. She's like, I keep getting random noodles and honey buns. Yeah, I was done right here. After the hello, my sweet little kitty. He sent her money. I said, I'm finished. I'm never watching another true crime documentary again. I am done. Okay. I don't care if Grant Amato called me up on my damn phone personally and said, Paul, I want to be interviewed by Reporting Live from the Sofa. I would say absolutely not. I can't survive the interview. Okay, there's no way I would. Either I would have to file something, some workman damn comp or something for the cringe level. Like, it would be that intense, okay? Oh my God, let's just get through this, y'all. So then we're taken back to Bulgaria. Remember, that's where Sylvia lives, is from. And we're also read bits of that letter. Remember the letter that we talked about a minute ago that Grant read saying that she had wrote him? So it's from Sylvia, and then we hear Colin asking Grant. They're on the prison call, he's reading it, and he's like, I have to ask you again, is that letter real? This is the second time we've heard Colin ask this. And here's the thing, pretend that you're Grant and that I am Colin, and that, like, here's the viewers over here watching us. So it's like the way the thing's shot a lot of times is you're watching Colin's faces as you're reacting to Grant. So during this time, he's like, when Grant's reading the letter, this is Colin. Same thing, we're probably all doing, we're like, really, Grant? She wrote that? Okay. So she reached out to you personally, found you all the way from Bulgaria in your little prison, found that, and then that's when he's like, I have to ask, is this real? Sure, Grant. You go, Grant. We might just have to name this damn video You Go, Grant. We'll see. Grant says that it's real. Colin goes to Bulgaria and meets this reporter. Remember, he found a local reporter. He wanted someone that could, like, speak the language and just be, like, very integrated in to, like, figure this stuff out. And they tried to find Sylvie. Now, an excerpt shows that says 18 months after his conviction, his appeal is denied. Okay, so this is the timeline, and this is going to be important because we're getting ready to get into the truth. So he goes to trial convicted. Does his appeal, 18 months, denied. So remember all this stuff. I'm innocent. Oh, they should have never shown my mother's picture. Oh, just buckle up. So there's a very interesting phone call that's played between Colin and Grant. And Grant, he comes around and it says, you know what? All this stuff is exhausted. These are done. I just need to go ahead and be honest. I did kill my family. I did commit those crimes. Y'all, it gives me goosebumps right now. He says I did commit those crimes and that's why I'm here. Y'all, so rarely do we see this. So rarely do we see it. It really, I was like, oh my God. So these are the first things, yet you made your family sit through all that? Jason, extended family, all that, you made them go through it. You sat there crying and lying. Let's keep going. So we're taken back to Mary, the woman who has seen Grant, and she says about the murders, Grant, this is heartbreaking. She said that Grant told her that his dad's last words were him yelling, Margaret and Margaret, over and over. That's the mother's name. I literally got goosebumps, y'all. He said that his mother was playing Candy Crush when he killed her. Then we go back to the conversation with Grant and Colin. Colin asked Grant where the gun is, for the murder weapon. Brace yourselves. He says that the gun is buried in the backyard of the friend's house where he stole it from. And so then we see investigators, a whole team is sent to go dig Blake's backyard up. They never find anything. Okay. Then we see a video chat of Colin talking to Grant. And he's basically like, look, I put my name out there. I gave them this information. We dug up where you said all this type of stuff. Grant is sitting there like this. Really? Maybe, when they were doing some landscaping, they, picked it up. You can tell that he literally, this is what his thoughts. Y'all actually went and did that? Y'all stupid? Like, laughing at them. And I was like, this guy is pure evil. Then in what I consider one of the biggest bombshells of there's several bombshells in this, but like a continuation of the bombshell, Colin, the filmmaker, plays Grant's confession for the attorneys, reporters, investigators, everybody. And Grant's attorneys are like, they've been like, oh, well, here's this and here's that, and he's innocent. And they're just real like, I guess this gives us closure. At least we now know what happened, or whatever. And it's like, how, okay. I get it's their job, you know what I'm saying? And their job, basically, like one of them said, is to save their client's life. In situations like this, you're just trying to save their life, right? There's not really like I'm going home. You know what I'm saying? We don't really know what happened here, but we're trying to save your life. And there's that. So Mary says she feels like she's never met the real Grant. So remember Mary, the elusive woman? You probably haven't. At all. Grant says everyone thinks, now this part right here, y'all, it's like the way they saved this for the end, and of course they had to, you'll see why when I read it, was like, whoa. Okay, like seeing into the eyes of evil. Grant says that everybody thinks that he murdered his family to be with Sylvie. He says that's not true. He goes back to the notion of being a failure, being nagged, all those things. Grant says he was very unreceptive to therapy. He says the day after said therapy session is when they admitted him to rehab, and he felt totally betrayed. Grant says it's during this time that he begins thinking about killing his family. So, yeah, he goes to this therapy, and like the next day they do the intervention or whatever, they have him put in rehab and all this, and that's where he plots his revenge. You know, he felt betrayed by them. He didn't have any control, he wasn't driving the ship in his life. Everything was up to everybody else in his life. He didn't know how to, let's get this done. You know what I'm saying? So when you're that way, of course, everything feels out of control. You feel at everybody's whim. You're having to go along with it. And that betrayal was obviously too much for him. Now, about the murders, he said, and this is him describing it, okay, and this is the part that's very chilling. He says that it felt while he was doing it very tactical, like one of his video games almost, but different than a video game. And he says that after each person that he killed, he was like, you're faced with this fact of like, you've done this, you can't turn away from this now. You can't get away from this. It's very final. Grant says that he made sure that nobody saw what he was about to do, so that their final thoughts weren't, wow, I can't believe you were about to do this to me. Now, so remember I was talking earlier about his mom, like the only saving grace is she didn't know? I mean, you know, again, there's that, but listen to how Grant describes this. Grant says that even in the process of doing something terrible, he is compassionate, and that his action of making sure they didn't know what was about to happen to them shows that. That right there, y'all, that's where I was like, this is pure evil. Whatever it is, narcissism, sociopathy, I don't know. He ain't right, you know what I'm saying? But that right there, to be like, to condition yourself to think that, and I mean, maybe you do in that moment, or in the after the moments, you have to find things to convince yourself that you're still human. You know what I mean? Because again, where I'm like, okay, yeah, if I had to go, and it was like you were given this choice of, you're going to go violently. Do you want it to be by surprise and you don't know what's coming? Or do you want to be looking in the eyes of the person you're doing it and you might feel extreme betrayal? Which do you think I'm going to pick? You know what I'm saying? But for him to pat his own back about that and be like, look, I mean, I have compassion. I mean, even when I was like wiping my family out, I made sure, you know, it was decently done. I mean, come on. I'm just like, what are you even talking about, dude? Okay, then we go back to Bulgaria and we hear a phone call. Brace yourselves. The reporter that Colin had been dealing with trying to reach Sylvia, she says she calls a phone number. This was recorded. She says, I'm calling on behalf of an American production company. And Sylvie says, tell the people, so it's Sylvie. They get her on the phone. She says, tell the people that you're working with that this whole situation has caused me extreme amounts of stress. It almost ruined her life. And the reporter is like, but if you tell your side of the story, your perspective, you can control the story. Through the narrative, you can tell your side. And Sylvie says, don't you think that I want to? She says, all sorts of things were said about me that were all sorts of nonsense. And she's basically like, I don't want to speak any further about this. Like, this was so life altering that no, this is a wrap, right? And you know, you'll see other people who elected to not be in this docuseries at all. I mean, family, people of this nature, when you find out, like, imagine being in her situation where it's like, oh wait, this guy was lying about everything and he killed his family over it. What? And again, we've never heard her side of the story, so you're kind of left to formulate like whatever that opinion is, whether it's, oh, this greedy woman, or, oh God, she's a victim, or whatever it is, right? But again, I can understand where there's two sides to it, like a legality thing, and then the personal whatever of, I want to move on. Same thing with the surviving family members, victims and stuff. It's, I don't want to be in your little docuseries. I just want to move on, right? This was a horrible thing. It defined our lives. It always will. They will never come back. I don't want to rehash it on here, and especially with cases like this where they, like I said, like they go viral, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's made its rounds and probably always will. As long as Grant Amato is alive, seeing the level of attention that he likes and the evilness of it, we'll hear from him again. Trust me on that. Okay, next we see Colin. He's on the phone with Grant. And he says, hey, we got Sylvie on the phone. And he tells him that she was deeply traumatized by the event and that she's been in therapy to try and heal from it. And that she just doesn't want to revisit any of this anymore. And she didn't want to talk to them or Grant. Now remember, he said that letter that she wrote, he was lying. Grant says, that's really interesting. He says it's pretty shocking to hear, or at least on the surface, that she was going through all that. He says apparently that must have been a really impactful thing. This is what I'm talking about. This is not a human, not the phone. Well, I don't know why I had to pick the phone up. This is not a human being. This is evil. Oh, yeah, she was shocked. I guess that was really impactful. Are you kidding? That's where the monster sneaks out. That you're able to see, oh, this guy doesn't feel anything and probably never has. Probably doesn't know what that is like. He just finally was painted in a corner to act on it. But he probably never has experienced any real emotion or attachment or anything like that, because you just hear, the real Grant comes out and it's like, this guy, this doesn't faze him at all. I mean, after he did it, he ran off and got on the phone with her, or the cam, or whatever you want to call it. There's that. So that's all the notes I took. So let's just kind of round everything out here. Okay, so let's just talk about some overall thoughts on this. So, like I said, about a year or so ago, I did the video on Grand Amato. That was kind of my intro into it. Most every creator here on YouTube, podcast channels, networks, they've all covered this trial. And what we learned, or at least what I learned through it, is number one, about the Amato family. That's one of the things that kind of draws me to true crime, is learning about the victims, their story, their lives, what they were doing with their lives. And I always say stolen, because I feel like that's what happens to them. Like, their life is literally stolen from them, right? They are stopped in their tracks of life and it's stolen. And this is a prime example of that. I mean, the mother's playing Candy Crush. The dad probably was coming in from work. Cody was probably coming in from work. I mean, all these things, and it just dead in their tracks. They're stopped and brutally murdered. Learning how much they did for Grant, how much they gave to him, and he was just this void. And when you look through the lens of obsession and compulsion and addiction and all these things, this case blew my mind to see the level of delusion and obsession that he had with her. Someone who is able, first of all, even having the agency and the ability to scramble up a couple $100,000 is insane to me. Like, I cannot wrap my mind around that, of being able to I spend $10,000, $15,000 a day on this person. My mind can't compute that. But then to see where he didn't even, it's like he had zero value of money, of people especially, and of relationships. And then also himself, I would argue. But zero understanding of money. It was just like a thing. It was like a token, almost like in the video games that he played. It wasn't real to him. It was just like a thing that you get over here and put over here, and now I can see her, and feeding that, stuff. Fascinating too about this case was, like I said earlier, the differences between he and Cody. Here they are, they're raised by the same people, raised in the same house, and look at how differently their trajectories were. Cody's doing all he can to look out for Grant. Grant's over here just sucking all that up. He's just a damn lead. She's, giving patients drugs, getting fired, doing this. I mean, just, crazy stuff with zero accountability. Now, yes, you could argue that the parents were probably kind and nurturing and enabling to a fault, right? And it's not to victim shame them or anything like that. It is what it is, It's one of those things where, looking back now, you can see, like I said, the train wreck coming, but one never expects their child, even if the child is spoiled, to do something to this level. And plenty of spoiled children are just spoiled and never do this, right? This sets him aside. And again, looking at him in this is the first that I've seen or heard anything from him after the crimes. And so seeing where I'm like, he still lives in this delusion about Sylvie. You can tell, this delusion that there really was something there. That was his life. You can tell him going back. But other times during the interview, and I'll use, for example, when he said the thing about the gun was buried in the backyard, and Colin goes, and then he's like, hey, you made me look like an asshole. And Grant's laughing and smirking. And you're like, this man is evil. This man loves to toy with people. He loves to hurt people. I would almost argue that he's going to get more evil. He would be more dangerous if he was let out in 10 years. It's just escalating and escalating, because now you're going to be hardened up by being in prison and all that. He also probably doesn't have a normal, and I hate using the word normal, but you'll see where I'm going with this, a normal, I don't know how you would say it, but reality-based set of something on a relationship. Because the clips they showed, well, obviously we see with Sylvie, right? But then this girl Mary, who I'm like, yeah, this whole like my sweet kitty and this creepy weird stuff. And it's like, dude, yeah, this is like a groupie maybe, like for her. So the fact that you're sitting here and just going down this rabbit hole with her and being all this way and sending her stuff, it's like, this is his MO. And maybe it's because he's so depleted of anything within that he has to offer something material, something of that to feel of value. But yeah, my overall take was I was like, yeah, this man is pure evil. There's nothing behind his eyes. There is no soul. It's just an empty, evil void. And he's exactly where he belongs. The best thing that he did in all of this was confessing so that hopefully there can be no more appeals. Like he's just like, I'm done. I did it. I'm where I belong. I killed my parents. But again, do I think it's the last we've heard of him? No. He clearly loves the attention way too much, and he will find a way to be in it somehow, some way. So if you watched it or if you didn't, let me know in the comment section what you think. I'm dying to hear. We'll probably do a comment video on this one after it comes out, just because I know it's going to be good. Y'all never disappoint. So anyways, that's it. I know this was a long video, so thank you for watching all the way through if you're still here. Roscoe thanks you. He's come and gone. I've had to record at different times, but he's currently sleeping, and he does ask that you drop him some little sofas in the comment section so he and I will have a place to sit and talk about Grant, all of his cringiness, and all of the cases that we do discuss here at the Sofa Squad. And until we meander our way down there, we'll see y'all soon. I just wanted to say thank you again for watching the whole video, and also thank you for being part of the Sofa Squad. Special thanks to all the Patreon members, channel members from both of my channels, everybody who likes, shares, subscribes, comments in the comment sections. It helps the channel out so much. Now, don't forget, I do have that other channel, the podcast channel. That's where we go live, we hang out, we talk. We have kind of sort of a schedule, but just be sure and check it out. I'll put it up here on the screen. Also, if you're looking for merch, be sure to check out my Teespring store. I'll put that up here. And then, like I said in the beginning of the video, if you want to follow me and Roscoe on the Instagram, go on, check it out. It's right here on the screen again. But once again, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being part of the Sofa Squad, and I'll see you in the next video.